Beautiful. The title of today's talk is Outward Bound, Evolution. And I'm going to start with a story that I read for the first time last night when I was sitting down to put my thoughts together to share with you today. It is a true story. It's a recounting of something that happened to Jean Houston when she was a young girl. She was being interviewed by somebody, which doesn't matter whom. Even in the email they didn't know who it was, but the question she was asked was, in your travels all around the world, having met thousands of very unusual individuals, who would you say would be the greatest example of self-mastery? Who would you say was the greatest example of enlightenment? And what was it about them that distinguished them from each other? Well, I was really interested in her answer. She said, I wouldn't describe an example of self-mastery, but I would of enlightenment. The most evocative example for me was an old man who I used to take walks with. When I was 14, my parents got divorced, and I was grief-stricken. I took to running down Park Avenue late for school. I would run from my grief. And one day I ran into an old man and knocked the wind out of him. I picked him up, and he said to me in a French accent, "Are you planning to run like that for the rest of your life?" I said, "Yes, sir, looks that way." He said, "Well, bon voyage." I said, "Bon voyage," and I ran to school. The following week, I was walking my fox terrier, Champ. I saw the old man coming out of a building. I lived at 86th, just off Park Avenue, and the old man lives somewhere around 84th and Park. He said to me, "Ah, my friend the runner, you have a fox terrier. Where are you going?" "Well, sir, I take Champ to Central Park after school. I just think about things." "I will go with you sometime, if that's okay." I said, "Well, sure. I will take my constitutional." Now, he was something. He had no self-consciousness at all. He had leaky margins with the world. He had a long French name, but he asked me to call him by the first part of it, to which my American ears sounded like Mr. Taylor. So I called him Mr. Taylor. We walked for about a year and a half, off and on, mostly Tuesdays and Thursdays. He would suddenly fall to the ground and look at a caterpillar. "Oh, Jean, look at the caterpillar. Ah, moving, changing, transforming, metamorphosing. Jean, feel yourself to be a caterpillar. Can you do that?" "Very easily, Mr. Taylor." I mean, here I was, 14 years old, a girl nearly 6 feet tall with red dots on my face. I felt like a caterpillar. He said, "What are you when you finally become a papillon, a butterfly? What is the butterfly of Jean?" "I don't know, Mr. Taylor." "Yes, you know, you know. I know you know. Now, what are you transforming into?" "Well, I think when I grow up, I'll fly all over the world, and maybe I'll help people." Well, it turned out to be largely true. "Ah, bon, bon, bon." And he'd say, "Oh, Jean, lean into the wind. There are these strong winds off Central Park. Ah, Jean, smell the wind. Same wind once went through Jesus Christ." Jesus Christ felt like this? Oh, yes. And Marie Antoinette, here she comes. Genghis Khan, not so good. Joan of Arc, Jeanne d'Arc, be filled with Jeanne d'Arc. Be filled with the tides of history. Well, we had all these wonderful games about life. Jean, look at the clouds. God's calligraphy in the sky. He would suddenly stop and look at you, and he would giggle, and you would giggle, and he'd giggle, and you'd giggle, and then he would look at you laughing, and laughing as if you were the cluttered house that hid the Holy One. I would go home and tell my mother, "Mother, I met my old man again, and when I'm with him, I leave my littleness behind." Well, toward the end of our walk together one day, he stopped suddenly and he turned to me and said, "Jean, what to you is the most fascinating question?" And I said, "It's about history, Mr. Taylor, and destiny too. How can we take the right path in history so that when we even have a destiny, or so that we even have a destiny? My friends at school all talk about the H-bomb, and I wonder if I'll ever get to be 21 years old, Mr. Taylor. You always talk about the future of a man as if we had a future. I want to know what we have to do to keep the future coming." He said, "We need to have more specialists in spirit who will lead people into self-discovery." What do you mean? He said, and this is exactly what he said. I was taking notes because I knew I was in the presence of greatness. "We are being called into metamorphosis, into a far higher order, and yet we often act only from a tiny portion of ourselves. It is necessary that we increase that portion. But do not think for 1 minute, Jean, that we are alone in making that possible. We are a part of a cosmic evolutionary movement that inspires us to unite with God. This is the lightning flash for all our potentialities. This is the great originating cause of all our shifts and changes. Without it, there is nothing but struggle and decline." And I said to him, "What do you call it?" "I've never heard of it. Can something as great as that even have a name?" "You are right," he said. "It is impossible to name." "Well, try to name it, Mr. Taylor. I've heard that once a thing is named, you can begin to work with it." He seemed amused, and he said, "I'll try." And then he said, "It is the demand of the universe for the birth of the ultra-human. It is the rising of a new form of psychic energy in which the very depths of loving within you are combined with what is most essential in the flowing of the cosmic stream." I didn't really understand what he was saying, but I nodded sagely, and I said I would ponder these things, and he said he would also. One day toward the end of our time together, this was actually the last day I ever saw him, Mr. Taylor began talking to me about the lure of becoming, a phrase that then became a part of my language, and also about how we humans are part of an evolutionary process in which we are being drawn towards something, which he called the omega point. He told me that he believed that physical and spiritual energy was always flowing out from that omega point and empowering us as well as leading us forward through love and illumination. And it was then that I asked him my ultimate question. The one that I must say has continued to haunt me all the days of my life. What do you believe it's all about, Mr. Taylor? His answer is enshrined in my heart. He started by saying, "Je crois." I believe. I believe that the universe is an evolution. I believe that the evolution is towards spirit. I believe that spirit fulfills itself in a personal God. And what do you believe about yourself, Mr. Taylor? He said, I believe that I am a pilgrim of the future. It was the Thursday before Easter Sunday, 1955. I had brought him a shell of a snail. Ah, escargot, he said. And then he began to wax ecstatic for the better part of an hour about spirals and nature and art, snail shells and galaxies, the labyrinth on the floor of Chartres Cathedral, which later became a symbol of my work, and the rose window and the convolutions of the brain, the whirl of flowers and the circulation of the heart's blood. It was all taken up in a great hymn to the spiraling evolution of spirit and matter. It's all a spiral of becoming, Jean. Then he looked away, and he seemed to be seeing into the future, and he said, Jean, the people of your time, toward the end of this century, will be taking the tiller of the world. But they cannot go directly. He used the French word, directement. You have to go in spirals, touching upon every people, every culture, every kind of consciousness. You have to go in spirals, touching upon every people, every culture, every kind of consciousness. It is then that the newest in the field of mind will awake, and we will rebuild the earth. And then he said to me, Jean, remain always true to yourself, but move ever upward toward greater consciousness and greater love. Those were the words that he said to me. And then he said, au revoir, Jean. Au revoir, Mr. Taylor. I'll see you Tuesday. And Tuesday came, and I brought Champ, and Champ whimpered. He seemed to know something. And my old man never came. Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday. 8 weeks I waited, and he never came again. Because it turned out he had died on that Sunday, Easter, in 1955. Years later, somebody gave me a book without a cover called The Phenomenon of Man. And when I began to read it, I said, my God, that's my pal. Oh my goodness, I said. I went to my friend and asked, have you got the cover to this book? And she gave it to me, and I flipped it over, and of course, there was my old man. No forgetting that face. Mr. Taylor had been Teilhard de Chardin. That it was extraordinary. Jean says he was the most enlightened person I've ever met. He certainly has a profound influence in my life, on my sense of history and of who and what we are. He was childlike, always in a state of wonder and awe and astonishment. There wasn't a question of self because he was so embodied in all things, in all existences. And he saw spiritual and physical energy as utterly necessary to each other. So that's ultimately what I have to say about the whole thing, and that's what I believe, she said to the interviewer. Now, Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit priest and a French philosopher. One of his other books he wrote was called The Divine Milieu, which attempted to do two things. First, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, there was a belief among some Catholics and other Christians that in order to be holy, one had to devote himself or herself to purely religious activity, and that secular work had no lasting value. He was consistent with the Jesuit motto of finding God in all things. He wanted to demonstrate that secular work, including his own scientific work, was an integral element of creation and the incarnation, so that for religious reasons, Christians should be committed to whatever work they were doing and offering whatever work they were doing and whatever the business they were up to the service of God. He wants to show how all human activities and efforts towards personal growth and human progress can be used to help the growth and development of the body of Christ. Not only are human efforts useful in this regard, but they are also somehow necessary. Even though people perform these actions as ordinary human beings, and they look like ordinary human actions, they are simultaneously being transformed in the divine milieu and become actions done in, with, and through Christ. I love that man. I love his writings. I'm sure some of you have read his works. Because here he was, not unlike us, in a sea of race consciousness. that has absorbed through history this belief that we are less than God. He knew something different. He devoted his entire life to it not unlike us as religious scientists. He knew that spirit and matter were one thing. He knew that everything we were as a human being, in the lure of our becoming, as we were called by spirit to spirit, was in divine right order and perfection, and was a part of establishing and awakening humanity to the Christ within all. That's what we teach. But what a beautiful story. I wept as I read it last night. And we are so hard on ourselves. So hard. You know, even when Judy was singing, what a great song. You know, just be present. Just be here. Just be here now. Because perfection exists. As you, as me, as everything. Now, as I'm speaking those words, at having told the story to you, I think you have expanded and opened to go, yeah, I can feel that. I can. Now, this coming Wednesday, when you get a sour phone call, or you go to your bank, or whatever happens, you get up on the wrong side of the bed, or you don't feel well and you've got a cold, where is this feeling? Where is this knowing? It's like the bear, right? Hibernating. Whoop, somewhere else. This is it. And this is my talk about evolution. I have to speak of evolution from the mystic's point of view, actually, because you can't have one without the other. Last week when I talked about involution, about all this wonderful stuff that happens as the beginning place or the continuing evolution of the becoming of the full expression and expansion of God or intelligence, shows itself in its creation. So to speak about evolution as the condition of our life cannot be spoken about without giving thought to this idea of this amazing spirit within all, this love, this inspiration, this awe of creation, this constant creative process of this caterpillar moving into butterfly, the metamorphosis of life itself, the perfection of that creative process and that metamorphosis. You can't talk about a result in your life without recognizing not only where it came from, but what it is comprised of right now. And if that be true about you, and that be true about whatever condition or situation is in your life right now, it is also true about you as a human being. We cannot separate it. You know, we get this new way of thinking in metaphysics. There's only one thing going on, cause and effect. The effect flows from the cause. The cause is in the effect. But when we're face to face with the effect, we go back to our old roots about being separate from God. That's why I said recognition trumps results. Because unless you are fully present and you're being here now, if you are being here now, you are so embodied and present with what is. You cannot be separate from it. You can't be separate from it. There's no possible way. What are you left with? Acceptance. Wow. Well, that feels good for a second. Until you decide there's something you've got to do about it. The constant struggle, right? Of being independent, in control, proving yourself so that you have value, so that you have this ego self-image fed, so it's feeling pretty good, you know? Can kind of get out of bed, or can actually make a phone call and tell someone you love them, or, it can actually show up at a CAPS meeting, Calgary Association for Public Speakers, which I did 3-4 weeks ago. Boy, I don't like those things. So it shores you up. And then when you get there, those ideas and those images that made you not want to go start to flood in. And what do you do at that moment? What do you do at that moment? When all those thoughts start to flood back, what do? You be here now. It may not be with the result you're looking for. It may not be what your mind has concocted as good and right in my life for this time in my life, for my highest and best. We say that in this teaching. When we do spiritual mind treatment, bringing this idea of this self-contemplation of the universe into opening our own mind and matching our mind and expanding it to open to the portal of this intelligence, this spiritual intelligence that knows all, into our experience, when we do this, we are letting go. Immediately as we do that, immediately as we recognize the truth in all things, we are letting go that littleness, that bound by form and our own familiarization or our unfamiliarization with this thing, this person, this relationship, this condition. We are letting all of that go, and we are seeing the truth of it. What is the truth of everything, everyone, every condition? What is it? It is nothing unless it is first the opportunity to remember who we are and what life is. One thing. Created. Created by a power so great that we just need to have faith in it. Implemented and expressed through a power so great that we don't need control, we just need, what do we need? We don't need control, we need clarity. We need wonder. We need to abandon ourselves to our creativity of our own mind. And the rest will be done onto us. Because when we move ourselves into that state of connection, which is, we can't think creatively if we're not inspired, right? We're just going to think what we always thought. So we need to get inspired to think creatively. Well, what inspires the soul? This story inspired me. Not because she had an experience that I would have loved to have, but how he was so inspired with life. That's why I wept. Because I know that inspiration. And so do you. You know it. Where do we put it? I don't know. The smaller purse I put on my shoulder, not the less things I put in it. There's always clutter. There's always more stuff. There's always distractions. Now, I could tell you about how involution and evolution of the creative process works, but you already have got that by this story. You've got it all. Right now, right here. Be present with that. Think of something in your life, or a person, or anything. A cough. Something that you want to rid yourself of. Something that you want to let go of. Let go. You know, we say let go and let God. But when we let go just for a fraction of a second and we entertain this thing called God or great mind or divine mind, usually the very first thing that shows up in our life we don't give thanks for. We go, whoa, it's not my picture. No. I'm just going to grab back onto that thing and I'm going to make it happen. You know, I just had this thought right now. You know, have you ever said, well, if you want to do it right, you got to do it yourself? Have you had that? Do you know we apply that to God? We think we know better. If we want the highest and best for ourselves, we better create that because, you know, God's out to lunch. God's busy over there doing something over there with someone else. I got to look after myself. If I want it done, if I want to get what I want to get. God just keeps giving us what it's all, he's the God's, not he, what did I say there? Where was I? I was transported back into Gene Houston's 14-year-old experience. I think it's because my mom said it last night. I'm going to divert here because this is on my mind. And, you know, I do that sometimes. I'm playing cards with my mom, right? And I'm slam dunking her. We play gin rummy almost every afternoon. And she said, how come I only get the small cards? You always get the high cards and the aces. And I said, Mom, it's a matter of mind over cards. And she said, well, I won't tell you what she said. And I said, look, I have been testing this theory, the theory that I teach, right, in my card games. And I am getting the cards, and I am going out in three turns and everything. And you know, as I started to do that, my mind said, well, you can do this in cards, so it's the same law. Why aren't you? Yeah. What? Could you think you could make a quantum leap here? You know? And so last night, Mom called me back. Because, you know, the constant argument about, well, I just wasn't dealt the right cards. I said, really? I think it's what you do with the cards you're dealt. Great metaphor, right? So we're talking about it, and I finally, and I'm not attached to it, but it kind of just showed up. I finally found a way to talk to her about the principles that I teach, because she prays to him, this is my point, this is what made me think of this story, every night before she goes to bed. She hands it over and does not see the role she plays in it. But if I talk about the card game, she starts to see her involvement. And you know what she called to tell me last night after she explained all this? Come over when you get back from church tomorrow. I will give you the money to buy a lotto ticket. If you're so smart about numbers, I want to get in on this. Funny, funny, funny. Anyway, that's her God. That is her God. And so we're completing today this idea, this creative process, involution, evolution. You know, the cross is a beautiful thing. I've had people ask me why I have a cross on my book if I'm a metaphysician. And I really, I'm always surprised at that question. Or why, if I still have a cross. People say, are you Christian? I say, yes. They said, wait a minute, now you're confusing me. This is new, you know, religious science. This is new thought, you know. I said, look, religious science has its roots in Christianity. Just the philosophy is different, you know. It brings us into the role of co-creator. But the cross is so beautiful. It is a physical symbol to me that identifies that my mind is the center of divine consciousness, right? It is the center of the cross. It is where heaven and earth meet. And it is with what consciousness I move forward out into my life in that becomingness of who I am. Today, Thanksgiving. I wish I could say I was grateful every day of my life. I go through many days where I forget about gratitude. You know, I'm too busy doing the next thing. There are some days I don't do my meditation practice. Oh well. Oh well. Because what is my intention? Who am I? What do I stand for? What is the meaning of my life? What am I passionate about? What do I keep showing up to be present with? Being in service to life. Being a student to life. Learning, expanding, loving. Giving, 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 giving. Learning how to give and love without missing myself. Because even in that very thing, even in that very action of having not just a pure intention to love, but an agenda somewhere deep in my subconscious mind, that inspires me to give or to love, that says I have not, therefore I must, I separate myself from God. So if I don't meditate one day, it's all right. I know who I am. I know what I'm about. And this is my life, just like you have your life. And you have a strong sense of yourself. And some days you don't. I wonder why. Maybe you're letting go. Maybe you're coming into this becoming. Maybe you are the caterpillar moving into the butterfly. And in those days, we don't know what's up and what's down, right? Oh well, it's okay. It's the perfection of the journey. What helps me is to know that as I open to whatever is going on, I contemplate myself. And through that contemplation and through my intention and clarity of wanting to express and expand the love that I am on this planet, whatever comes out the other end in evolution will be just divine right order. And I will say, like Teilhard de Chardin. Look at the wind. That's the same wind that moved through Jesus Christ. Here I am. So when you leave here today, however it is you are, say, I am of that movement. My steps walk this earth, the same earth, but becoming more of itself that Jesus Christ walked upon. I am the consciousness moving forward. These things in greater shall you do. Holmes, this is not my teaching, religious science. This is your teaching. This is who we are. Just keep being where you are and feel the wind. And know your heart is true. And that's the best of life. And so it is.